and take it away and lead our panel. Douglas Post has written some 40 plays, musicals, screenplays, teleplays, and radio adaptation. His work for the theater has been produced in New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, Canada, England, Wales, Germany, Austria, Russia, China, and South Africa. And here I'm going to take down my screen so that we can see Doug as we talk about him. Here we go, Doug. There we go. That makes more sense to look at you as I describe you. He has received the L. Arnold Weisberger Playwriting Award, the Midwestern Playwrights Festival Award, the Cunningham Commission Award, the Blue Ink Playwriting Award, and 3 Playwriting Fellowship Awards from Illinois Arts Council, and been nominated for 3 Joseph Jefferson Awards, a Susie Bass Award, and an Emmy. And we are very proud to call you an instructor here at Graham. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Doug, and look forward to the panel ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you, Seth. Hey, just for my own edification, there was a moment there when I couldn't hear you. Did other people experience that, or was that just on my end?
I think they did.
I did.
It was just I think Seth just froze for a moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Hey, so let me please, as Seth has very graciously introduced me, I want to introduce the 3 people who are with us today. Catherine Filleul is an award-winning French, Algerian-American playwright and librettist who has been writing about human rights for decades. Her plays and operas have been produced nationally and internationally. In New York City, her new musical, Welcome to the Big Dipper, with composer Jimmy Roberts, premiered off-Broadway at the York Theater, and her play, How to Eat an Orange, premiered at La Mama Downstairs Theater. Catherine's new play, White Savior, was nominated for the Venturous Playlist. Her other recent plays include Turning Your Body into a Compass, a live stream web drama at Culture Hub in New York City, What Does Free Mean at Nora's Playhouse in NYC, Kidnap Road at La Mama NYC, Selma 65 NYC and US Tour, Lose at La Mama NYC, and Looking for Lilith in Louisville, Kentucky. She is the librettist for 4 produced operas and has traveled for her plays to conflict areas including Bosnia, Cambodia, Guatemala, Haiti, Iraq, and Morocco, and also to Sudan and South Sudan on an overseas reading tour with the University of Iowa's International Writing Program. Robert Schenken has received a Pulitzer Prize, a Tony Award, a WGA Award, a Humanitas Award, and is a 3-time Emmy-nominated writer. He is the author of 20 plays, including All the Way, The Great Society, Building the Wall, and The Investigation. His upcoming work includes Hanusan, which is optioned for Broadway, Old Cock, a collaboration with the Portuguese theater company Mala Voadora, the world premieres of Bob and Jean, a love story at Arizona Stage, Zach Scott, and Bay Street Theater, Reconstruction, commissioned by Alabama Shakespeare Festival, and a musical, The 12, directed by John Doyle. Robert sits on the boards of the Orchid Project, the Dramatists Guild National Council, and is a member of the National Theater Conference. He is also a New Dramatists alumni. Octavio Solis is a playwright and author whose works have been mounted in theaters across the country, such as the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the California Shakespeare Theater, Seattle Repertory Theater, Portland Center Stage, Hartford Stage, the Alley Theater, the Dallas Theater Center, the Center Theater Group, Yale Repertory Theater, the Denver Center for the Performing Arts, and the Lyric Theater of Oklahoma. He worked as a voice actor and consultant on the Disney Pixar film Coco. His short stories have been published in a number of periodicals, including the Chicago Quarterly Review. Octavio has received numerous awards, including the United States Artist Fellowship for 2011 and the 2014 Penn Center USA Award. His book, Retablos, is published by City Lights Publishing. He recently produced Ashland Beckett Shorts Festival in Ashland, Oregon. Octavio is a Thornton Wilder Fellow of the MacDowell Institute and a member of the Texas Institute of Letters. And I want to say, I've known Octavio since he and I were both undergraduate students at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, where, among other things, we studied acting, playwriting, and even performed in a few shows together. I've known Robert since the summer of 1989, when he and I were asked to develop work at the O'Neill National Playwrights Conference, and then later when we served on the Council for the Dramatists Guild of America, a position that Robert still holds and serves on. And Catherine and I are new acquaintances. We were introduced by our mutual friend, Kia Corthron. And since I have sent out some information about today's event, I have to tell you, Catherine, a number of other mutual friends have gotten back to me to say how lucky I am to have you as a part of this panel. So thank you very much. And Robert and Octavio, thank you guys too. I know some of you have a few connections to each other. Do you just want to mention those briefly before we get into it?
Yes, I was going to say that it is just so deeply emotional and moving for me to say that Octavio and I came into New Dramatists in the same year, and I hold that as a great treasure. And Kia Corthron, who is the reason that I'm here, is somebody that I've been working with and have known for pretty much my entire career here in New York. And Robert and I hope to get a coffee in New York sometime soon. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, I have connections with all three of you. I've known Katrine since we were both initiated into New Dramatists. We were the class of 1998, maybe? I don't remember. And Bob and I have spent a lot of time at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, where a lot of his works have premiered there, including All the Way. He's always welcome at our company here. And Doug, as he mentioned, I've known him since 1976 or so, when I started at Trinity University in San Antonio. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Octavio. Okay, so I have a few questions that I'm going to pose to you. In the interest of time, I actually wrote these out. I hope they don't sound too officious. I will try to make them conversational and leave lots of room, hopefully, for you to participate. We are living through a time when playwrights are being hit left, right, and center. From the left, it feels like many people now assume they are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of never being offended by anything at any time or place. And if our plays don't check all of the socially responsible boxes, we can be subject to consternation and even cancellation. From the right, our institutions are being taken over, our funding is being cut, and our books are being banned. But the left can also ban books it doesn't care for. And when I say center, well, we still have to figure out how to earn a living while finding a market for our theatrical works, which is an age-old problem. But given this day and this age, how are you three navigating your way through? How does all of this affect your work and the work of your collaborators? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Anybody care to throw themselves into the fray?
Well, I'll start by saying that for me, we still face the same challenges. And that for 30 years as a writer of human rights, I would prefer to use the word human rights rather than the word politics or political, not because I'm opposed to the word, but I think in the United States, there's been a misinterpretation that when one is involved in writing about politics, that immediately goes towards agitprop. And so I think that for me as a storyteller, I have always approached what is the most urgent topic that I can think of at the time. And we all live in different historical circumstances which are not within our control. Even if you're superstitious, you do not control history. And for me, the horror of seeing what has happened as a woman, I mean, I never used to talk about being a woman playwright as part of the hurdle. I never even thought about it. But the patriarchy has been in place and rooted for my entire career. And I bring it up only because at the core, I think women's rights have been ignored in terms of human rights. Who are the patriarchs and the dictators and the people that have been wreaking havoc generally? So I say this with hope because I truly believe, and I'm not being disingenuous when I say that my artwork and my commitment to humanity is one where I believe that hope and change is around the corner. And I think that all of us here, all four of us, have dedicated our lives to that.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, well said. My orientation has been through Latino theater, and and by its very nature, it has always been political theater. The whole basis of Chicano theater has been a theater of protest, has been a theater for human rights, has been a theater for labor rights, for equality, and I come into that a little late because there was a hole in my education. We didn't know about the teatro movement, which in the early 70s spawned over 500 theaters, new theaters in this country. It was completely not part of any curriculum in both my undergrad and graduate school programs. I had to come by that simply by direct contact with the teatro that had arisen in Dallas. But that's when I figured out who I was as a writer, and really actually who I was as an individual. I had thought that I had to be Arthur Miller, that I had to be Harold Pinter, that I had to write like them and be like them in order to come by my work honestly. But it wasn't until another theater company showed me that I was brown and that I was Latino and that my culture mattered and that there were plays I could write about my culture that were still reflective of the American and global experience. But its basis has always been in theater of protest. So that's where I come by my works. That's and also I was raised on in El Paso, less than a mile from the Rio Grande. So the border has long been in my work a major motif that I go back to again and again and again in my plays, and so that figures very prominently in my work as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Octavio. Robert?
So we have to acknowledge that we're living through an extraordinary moment, a very genuine and real crisis in which the fundamentals of democracy are at stake. I am trying to navigate this situation one day at a time, trying to stay positive, support my community where I can. In this environment, to pick up on what Catherine said, hope is an important political action. They want us confused and despairing and hopeless. To express hope is a political action. People are hungry for what we have to offer. One way to think about politics is it is a battle of competing narratives. Narrative. Storytelling is our life's work. We can make a huge difference. They know that. That's why they are attacking the arts. This is the standard initial movement by every fascist, authoritarian government in the history of the world. They attack us because they fear us, and they fear us because, in fact, we are powerful. And I try to constantly keep that in mind.
Beautiful. Thank you, Robert. So let me ask another query. and some of you have already touched on this. I have this idea that we are born social animals, but not necessarily political animals. I myself was largely without any political leanings, and I say this without pride, until my late 20s or early 30s. But I can remember when that changed and why that changed. And so I went from someone who was, for the most part, apolitical to someone who could easily shut down any dinner party he was invited to. That remains true today. And by the way, I'm also available for weddings and bar mitzvahs. Was there a moment in time, or perhaps a period of time, when you became politically engaged? Or, unlike me, were you always that way? And do you remember when politics or human rights started showing up in your plays?
Well, as soon as I started writing my first Latino play, which was my first commission from a small theater in Dallas that I just finished working with again after 35 years, um, I realized how that the act of writing my plays was a political act. When I started writing plays for Latino actors who were not getting cast, who were and for directors who were not getting the assignments that they wanted to be able to direct the plays they wanted, I started writing plays for them, and large regional theaters uh, took notice and said, "We want your voice here. We want you to share your ideas with our audience, which is not Latino." So where I went from working with small underground Latino audiences and other people who wanted to also share in that experience to working in the large Lord Theater system, and that in itself became a political act. We all felt like we had taken over the theater. Everyone around us was white, but we were Latinos working in there, and it says we're taking over. We're bringing our own theater company in here, and it felt incredibly subversive. At the same time that we also felt very respectful, very honored to be there, to be given that opportunity, and that's when I realized that I had the opportunity to say things, to write about issues that mattered to me and my community to the larger um, mainstream audience.
Very good. Uh, Robert, perhaps, and then Catherine?
And my work has always been political. I've always been political. I was just born that way, raised that way. Political in the sense that thematically it often explores power, politics, and race in America. So the Kentucky cycle all the way, the Great Society. But sometimes its politics is very specific and issue driven. So for example, Pure Agitprop, Tachi no Ki, a play I wrote in 1988 in support of the Reparations Act for Japanese Americans, or Building the Wall, a drama written just before Trump's first inauguration, or The Investigation, A Search for Truth in 10 Acts, which is an attempt to take the Mueller report and make it accessible and meaningful to a larger audience. So we did one very star-driven reading, taped, release the tape, put the play online for free download, where it's been seen 1.5 million times.
Wow.
So there are a lot of ways to approach this notion of what is a political play and how one can take effective action through the act of writing a play. And I've been all over the map as far as that's concerned. It just depends on what it is that I'm pissed about in the moment.
For me, I am the child of many diasporas. My mother is from Algeria. My father came from France. French was my first language. I'm the child of immigrants. I've always considered myself an outsider. And I think war has been at the core of this. My grandfather fought in World War I and World War II. The country was divided in half between the Nazi regime and the French regime. And so that has always been inside of me. And my search in terms of what I write about, I've been deeply engaged with US complicity and how it has really ravaged countries. Cambodia is a country that I've written about extensively, and the heartbreak that I hold inside of me that Nixon and Kissinger created the imbalance that brought the Khmer Rouge to power, and that I currently have a beloved friend, Thierry Seng, who is in prison in Cambodia right now, and that I feel that these are global issues and that we can only find the answers, and I write about this all the time, for ourselves, going back to the acknowledgement that we live on the bones of the Native American genocide and slavery built the United States. Mass incarceration is where it is because of slavery, and that all of the political aspect of this for me and why I write is because we are responsible to be sustainable. In other words, when we start something, we have the responsibility to continue it. And that is in some sense something that I feel lucky about, because that has brought me all of the collaborators that I currently have.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Gosh, you are all such an articulate group. No surprise there, but it's just lovely to hear you speak. I teach playwriting, as Seth mentioned, for the Graham School, but I also teach theater appreciation. And one of the courses I keep coming back to is called 8 Great Political Plays. In this course, I talk about how agitprop, or agitation propaganda, is used in such plays as Clifford Odets' Waiting for Lefty, which was specifically designed to elicit a response. But then we also investigate plays like Jean Anouilh's Antigone, which is adapted from Sophocles, where you can find yourself on both sides of the argument, meaning Creon's point of view as well as Antigone's. And then there's the work of someone like Anna Devere Smith, who comes at her topics from a number of different vantage points. In terms of your work, do you favor one approach over the other, or does it depend on the story you're trying to tell?
Well, I like to look at I like to look at complications. I like to find the plays that and situations that don't present the issue so black and white, that don't where it's not immediately clear what's right and what's wrong, where the characters have to wrestle with the choices that they are confronted with, because they're complicated, and they're complicated simply because the characters are also deeply flawed, as we all are. We all come with our flaws. We all bring our flaws, and in the end, the character has to make a choice and die by it, live by it, and die by it. So I'm drawn to those works. Um, my way, besides Chicano theater, into political theater was through Bertolt Brecht. I took my junior year abroad to study in England, and that's where I discovered him and his works. And there was another playwright that seemed to reflect a lot of a lot of Brecht's work, that was big at the time in England when I was there, and that was Edward Bond. And I really liked Edward Bond's work, because he was like fiercely political, but it was complicated. It was really rooted in the complexities of the characters and the situations as well. So you walked out of the theater feeling like, yeah, I know what I have to do, but man, what a ringer they put me through, you know? Um, so, and it's real easy to, when you're dealing with a hot button issue like immigration or deportations or the border, to sort of just take one stand, but and only that one stand. But even the border itself is deeply complicated. It's and so my works have that component built into it.
Great, they have that complexity to them.
Right.
Um, Catherine?
Yeah, I never think about a message for a play. I think about my plays as a prism, like PRISM, in which audience members, the play casts lights in different ways so that audiences can come to it and have a creative act as they're watching it. And I would echo what Octavio says, never, for me, at least part of what he said, never a neatly tied kind of resolution, but of, uh, I wrote a play about Pol Pot, and his and the U.S. And Pol Pot was a very soft-spoken, lovable man. This is not, antagonists are fascinating and exciting because, and they're, the other thing I'll say is that the craft of playwriting is such a amazing one, and that by storytelling, we can, I think, in an artistic way, uh, allow the audience to engage in an active, collaborative way that I think is really unique to theater.
Very
I feel that this story demands its own form and its own shape, and it will reveal itself. I don't come in necessarily with a hard idea about what this must be like. Every story is different, um, and I try to find what the story requires. Um, so, if it's agitprop, it's agitprop. If it's tragedy, it's tragedy. If it's drama or comedy or an opera, it is whatever it is. I really don't. I dislike the idea of postulating a series of operational methodology by which one must or must not create theater. Again, the subject often finds you. It's the thing that gnaws at you, that won't let you go, that I write in my own way to understand or to explain to myself.
Yeah, I like that very much. It reminds me of that idea that you never learn how to write a play, I think. You only learn how to write this play. Robert, I'm wondering if you could take a few minutes to talk to us about the Dramatist Legal Defense Fund and how it is currently meeting this moment.
Sure. So the Dramatist Legal Defense Fund is a separate entity that was created by the Dramatist Guild, sits under their umbrella. It has historically been focused on First Amendment issues, censorship, and copyright, protecting playwrights' legal title, but also the complicated world of what constitutes fair use versus copyright protection. So take a play like Donald Margulies' The Lohman Family Picnic, and the estate, the Miller estate, saying that you had no right to do that. So that's kind of thing. But now we're in a very different world. I start off saying, we are in the middle of a genuine crisis, a unique moment. And the DLDF is trying to respond to this moment by sharpening our mission, and has, as a result, created a task force which is dedicated to responding quickly and nimbly to the variety of assaults on arts funding and legal, but not lawful, attempts, local, state, federal, to restrict free speech. So what we try to do is identify these issues as they arise, make the membership aware of what the issue is, give them actionable items as citizens, not as playwrights specifically, but as citizens. Here is what you can do. It is all about empowering members, giving them actionable information. Don't feel helpless. Do this. Most recently and most excitingly, we just hired Annie Dorson, who is a theater director in her own right, Passing Strange in New York, who recently got her law degree from NYU with a focus on tech policy and civil rights. And she will now be kind of our leading force within the DLDF. So we are an organization dedicated to supporting playwrights and defending them on First Amendment issues, but also in the midst of this unprecedented assault on arts funding and free speech.
Right, and I guess we should say not only playwrights, but composers, lyricists, and librettists.
Yes, yes.
So let me ask you all this. Again, this feels like something a few of you have already gotten into, but what advice do you have for writers and other artists who are trying to engage with our day and age in order to impact their community, their country, and the world at large?
Well, I'll start by saying that the way in is always personal. What is your personal way in? What does it mean to you? Why are you exploring it? You have to have some stake in it in some respect, or else you'll care less, a little less. If there's something really that calls you, that really says this is about you, about the writer, then 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 it's all as well as being about the people that are being affected by the issue or the whatever it is that is being addressed, then you'll find your way in. You'll always find your way in if you start from your own personal place, why it matters to you, why are you in this, why are you exploring this. If you're doing it just because you think, oh, this will sell, this will get produced because it's a hot button issue, that's one, maybe so, but I think the more trenchant works are those that have a real personal dynamic as well as a political one,
Good.
or one that deals with human rights, as
Yes,
Katrine said.
yes. So maybe Catherine and then Robert?
Sure. I agree with Octavio. You are not alone, I would say. I mean, you're welcome to reach out to me, many people are out there uh, asking for things. It took me my whole life to figure this out, but you can ask people, and oftentimes they will be there for you. A couple of ideas that come to mind in terms of thinking about models. I think currently we we need to remember, and this could be helpful for people, that very small percentage of people go to the theater in the United States, and that what are some different models that can be used to reach people? I have a new play that is an epistolary play that I designed with that in mind, and it was really fun to think about how we could do that in a different way. Um, your passion. I just out of the blue wrote a play about Usha Vance, the wife of J.D. Vance. It was like it poured out of me. So sometimes you'll have an obsession, and it'll take you over. So that's a different way to think about it too. And then the other is some things take forever. Some things take a very, very long time to create, and that's okay as well.
Absolutely. Robert?
Well, I completely agree with Octavio and Catherine that the personal passion, what is it that pisses you off? What is it that bothers you? Write about that. From a you know, one of the ways in which we stop ourselves or hamper ourselves or get mired in this sense of helplessness is because the thing is too big. You know, it's overwhelming. It's too big. And I'm very comforted and reminded of the long-standing maxim that all politics is local. Um, and this is where you can have the most effect, the most power, is writing about what is important in your community, what is important in your neighborhood, what is happening there that needs attention. Um, you know, you're looking for where to place the thin edge of the chisel. And local is often that place. And I would to that I would say, if you can, make it potable, portable, and give it away.
Fantastic. So I know we have some questions coming in. Seth, do you want to perhaps field these questions and toss them our way?
Yes, thank you all for this discussion so far. And the first question that we have here dates back to maybe an earlier part of the conversation where you're talking about funding. They asked, did Shakespeare and Brecht receive government funding? But I guess more broadly, do you want to talk at all about the history of the role of funding in theater and how that's changed over time within the arts and, any reflections on that evolution?
Well, in the early days, like certainly during Shakespeare's time, there was royal patronage. So a lot of earls and lords and queens and kings and princes certainly supported the companies as well as the playwrights, and I'm sure Shakespeare had his fans. I don't know about Brecht though. He was writing from uh, in East Germany, so I'm sure there might have been some subsidies that were there, government subsidies from the government that's helped support his company. But I really can't speak to. I don't recall how much of that really how much government funding he and his company received. The Berliner Ensemble. That's it.
We have another question in here. It is quoting Harold Pinter, who once said, the majority of politicians on the evidence available to us are interested not in truth, but in power and maintenance of that power. To maintain that power, it is essential that people remain in ignorance, that they live in ignorance of the truth, even the truth of their own lies. What surrounds us, therefore, is a vast tapestry of lies upon which we feed. I'm curious, based on that, if you have responses to how that may influence your thinking about the political theater and plays that you engage.
Yeah, I mean, Robert mentioned that earlier and said it very eloquently. There's something that I believe that art reaches beyond our sight, imagination, and expectations, and that art is so powerful that it needs to be nurtured. And going back to the funding thing, um, I mean, for one, patronage does still exist, and one can think about it as people that support the arts in whatever way. And, there are countries that it have government support, and the United States never has. So we need to look for support and again sustainability in in whatever ways we can. And I think if you look at the four, all of the people that are here today in this talk, everybody has had to cobble together ways to do their work.
Yeah, I would say actually, I don't think it's true that that's never been the case in the United States. The WPA theater in the 30s and 40s was very, very successful, a real renaissance in American playwriting. And it was crippled and ultimately killed in Congress by a very specific movement that was threatened by it, that regarded it as communist and subversive. Look, I'm sure Sophocles and Aeschylus sat around bitching about how they couldn't get any fucking money to tell this story that they wanted to tell. I just think that's been a problem for artists from the get-go. And it is one, of course, I would love to see much more funding than we have had in the past, and certainly much more funding than we have today. But I think that it is always going to be an issue. I'm not suggesting that we simply give up on it, but I think we also always have to find ways to work around that. Um, and again, I think this is, it's the jujitsu magic of turning what is a handicap into an advantage, which is, okay, so I can't do this with a cast of 25, which would be ideal, but I could do it with a cast of 2. Well, how would that work? Sometimes the most amazing stuff happens because you are limited in certain resources and you're forced to be resourceful. It forces you. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong about that. That's often very, very exciting work. Again, I'm not suggesting we embrace our poverty. I'm just saying, let's not let it cripple us. All right.
Mhm.
Keep
Yeah.
your eyes on the prize, which is telling the story you want to tell. Go tell that story, however you can find a way to do it. That's all that matters. Tell your story.
I love that, Bob. That's so right. That is so right. I like that Harold Pinter quote because it sort of reminds us that part of our job is to shed light on those dark corners where we don't like to look, or we've been tricked into or gaslit into not looking. I'm working on a play right now about Ted Williams, the greatest slugger who ever lived, who was half Mexican, and for years, for most of his life, hid that fact from the media and from everyone around him. And he had a brother, Danny, who ended up taking most of his mother's looks and looked far more Mexican than he ever did, and ended up having a very, very different life, contrary to in contrast to Ted Williams' own sparkling career as a major sports figure and a World War II and Korean War hero. So in doing this, I'm thinking about, like, what would make a man want to hide his heritage? What was there to be ashamed of? What was there? Why did he feel compelled to hide that part of himself and present himself as a purely white American playing baseball with all these other guys? At a time also where when the players from the Negro League were finally being let into the major leagues, were finally being hired and brought into the major leagues. So I think that those that's a way in which I can explore uh, something political, but also by looking at it from a very, very personal perspective, because someone lived a lie, someone lived their life as a lie, and we bought into it. Why? Why would he do that? And why would he abandon his brother who ended up living more or less a life of crime? uh, when he had everything going for him. So that quote really reminds us of what we're about.
We have another question from the audience that reads, how do you avoid the problem of watching someone's ideology on stage? And they quote a professor from Oxford saying that he avoids theater because it often tells you one perspective. And we were talking earlier about how issues are often more complex than X versus Y. And so how do you draw out the political complexities rather than potentially promote a single ideology in your work?
Well, I think that's what this entire discussion has been about.
Yeah, I think it's about staying in the mess of real life, which is complicated and confusing and confounding, that people can this the notion of being able to hold two opposing thoughts in your head at the same time, which alas feels like a distressingly in short supply these days. I really feel like in the theater we need to lean into that in a big way, into the mess, the complicated mess that is life, and that these issues are.
And can I ask a related question? Because the next question here in the chat, and they write, what about the lack of subversion in today's political plays? I feel that a lot of the writing is on the nose and preaches to the choir as if a rhetorical question. The writer seems to believe the audience should or automatically does agree with their views. And so, how do you as writers, knowing your own views, wanting to have it come, Octavio, as you talked about, from a personal place, still try to put yourself almost, in other people's shoes who may be in your audience to think about how they may be using these same fact patterns or ideas differently. I'm curious if that's an objective part, or maybe that's not part of the process at all.
I
Yeah,
was just going to say that we are, or at least I'm a storyteller. I am telling a story, showing a story with characters, have no ideology to impart besides the action of the story.
I would say put the truth in the mouths of madmen. That's what I would do. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm working on a production here at OSF of Quijote Nuevo, and it's my adaptation of Don Quixote, and it's set in modern day America with right on the border between Texas and Mexico. And my Don Quixote is a Cervantes scholar who's conflated his own life with that of the books he's been teaching all his life as he slips into dementia, as he starts having symptoms of Alzheimer's, and so he's attacking those drone balloons that guard the border. He's attacking the border patrol, literally hurting them, as at the same time that he's also wantonly killing sheep and hurting people, all in the name of honor and truth and justice, and and just when you think, yes, okay, he's the hero for the Latino community, he does something really dangerous, really stupid, and so you have to go, oh, I don't know. Can I really follow him? Is he a hero, or is he just a nutcase, an old man, who's going nuts? So it's so I feel like when I feel compelled, like to put it out there, what it is that I stand for, I put it in the mouths of idiots and madmen, so that you have to take it with a grain of salt. But I'm with Katrine. We're there to tell stories. We're not, I don't want to preach to the choir. The choir, most of the people coming into the theater are already on my side anyway, but there's maybe a different way in which I can then affect their thinking. I think that's, and unlike Brecht, who really only wanted to make them hit them here so that they would deliberately go out and hit the streets, get it, start protesting. I also think that it's really through the heart. We have to affect people's feelings in a way that makes them connect with the issue on a personal level. It's like, and going back to what Bob said about all politics is personal. We change one person on how they feel on an issue. Just one person, we've succeeded. We've already succeeded there.
David Hare, who's probably the foremost political writer of his generation on the other side of the pond, says he tries to write plays. I'm not sure he's always successful in this particular area, but he tries to write his plays so that you can always agree with the last thing that was said.
I
So-
also think there's a ingrained disservice in people talking about writing. I mean, ultimately, you have to see our plays or read, and reading a play, I think, is just fine. But it's the work, and every person will make the decision on what they think on that basis.
We have a question here from Mark, Doug, about your teaching and just some of the courses that you've taught and the 8 plays that were referenced earlier in the chat. And then I want to ask a question, and maybe you can start this after you talk a little bit about your teaching, Doug. The final question here, which I think is really interesting, if there's a playwright for each of you that you think has really captured the practice of political playwriting. So if there's, a playwright that you really admire in that regard. So Doug, get us started just with a bit of background in your teaching, and then tell us your chosen playwright that you might admire in that regard, and then we'll
Sure.
hear.
In terms of playwriting, there's a track that my students or potential students can get on, which is in the fall, I teach Introduction to Playwriting. And then in the winter, writing the 10-minute play, in the spring, writing the 1-act play. And then this summer, I'm teaching Developing a Play in Progress. So there is a way to move through that hopefully makes sense to people. But then in terms of theater appreciation, it's everything from 8 great political plays to the plays of Tennessee Williams, to a women in theater course that I teach, where we talk about Carol Churchill and Timberlake Wharton Baker and Lucy Kirkwood and others. So I think in my 4 or 5 years now at the Graham School, I've taught something like 20 different courses, and I try to mix it up whenever I can. In terms of a playwright who I deeply admire, I mentioned David Hare a minute ago. His play, Plenty, probably taught me more about how to write a play than any play I've ever read. And, he wrote this play when I think he was back in his late 20s, and he's now written 30 or 40 scripts since then. And somebody once said to him, you've never written a better play than Plenty. And he said, that's true, but neither is anyone else.
I love the humility. Kat.
Yes, so I will talk about Kia Corthran as being a playwright who she says she's a political writer. I have had the great joy of following her work since the 90s and have seen probably a good deal of her plays on stage. She is able to tackle uh, what many topics as they come up, and does so with compassion and great characters. So I would say Kia, and I did also write down for something else I was working on, Octavio. When I saw his work, it really was life-changing for me. And in terms of teaching, I would say I'm more of a mentor to people, and I'm going to bring up Liz Lerman because I really feel that that can be a great process for talking about work. So I'll leave it at that.
Robert.
Well, I'll just talk about the 2 writers whose work I admire and 2 plays. An Octoroon by Brandon Jacob Jenkins, which I think is one of the most brilliant plays of the last 25 years. Just stunning play. Gobsmacked me. And Carol Churchill, whose Cloud Nine and Top Girls, remain, I think, just groundbreaking works and exemplars in how to do this, and continues to do it to this day. These are 2 writers I admire, and a handful of plays that have really affected me personally.
Octavio, you have our final word.
Well, I've already mentioned the playwrights that were formative for me in terms of my political orientation, but I would add Luis Valdez to that, because Luis started El Teatro Campesino, and the theater continues to grow, and he's still writing. And his sons are also directors and working on producing as well. And so he's one of my heroes. Uh, I don't teach very much except in small doses here and there, you know, a workshop here, a workshop there, maybe a semester. But always my orientation, I'm fixated on just getting them to be able to sit and write something, because a lot of them feel like they can't do anything at all. So I have exercises that I've acquired through my mentor Maria Irene Fornes that I apply to them, and almost invariably they write from some place that is deeply personal, that also has greater resonance, political resonance to the world, whether it's the environment, whether it's gender issues, whether it's women's rights and human rights for people of color, whether it's whether the issues are around racism or sexism, ageism, um, and they almost always come out from something like that. So I champion them. They're often embarrassed by that, but I champion them when they do that.
Well, thank you all for being here with us virtually. Doug, thank you for taking us up on the invitation as an instructor to plan an event alongside and bring additional inquiry and insight to the topic that you so brilliantly teach on. And thank you all for joining us. We really appreciated having you here to explore this topic of writing political plays in this moment of polarization. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so much,
guys.
Seth. Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doug.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Katrine. See you,
Bye.
Bob.
Thank you.
See you.
Come
See you
visit.
soon, I hope.
Come
Bye-bye.
visit. Come visit. Come visit.
Goodbye,
See you guys.
everybody. I'll write you tomorrow.